All right, so I think this will be our final segment. So yeah, we've covered all kinds of territory, all kinds of ground, lots of good stuff. Um, Now I want to get to maybe some, I don't know, maybe a little bit more simple or just mundane. I'm looking at my questions and I feel like some of this we sort of already covered. Um, yeah, we covered this, we covered that. Well, let me see. Let's do this. We talked about this a little bit, but one of my questions at the end is what advice would you give to someone going to China to teach for the first time? What should they know? How can they prepare? We talked about that a little bit, but maybe we can focus on that.
Yeah, so specifically, a teacher coming to China, um, one thing I would tell them to prepare themselves for is disorganization. We did talk about that earlier, but a lot of things just happen at the last minute and changes at the last minute. Paperwork regarding your visa or your pay or something at work, or the police are coming to do this and you have to do this. And there's a lot of stuff that just happens on the fly all the time. You're working on
Yeah.
Saturday and you have to give this presentation. Uh, be ready right now because it's Friday night, and you're just like, what?
Yeah.
So that is definitely something you gotta be prepared for. And then student morale. If you're going to be
Mhm.
working at a private school, specifically a boarding school, their lives are really regimented, like almost like a prisoner. Like when they're allowed to eat, when they're allowed to do this, when they're allowed to do that, lights off, time to sleep, and their weekends are usually filled with, at least my experience, more studying, more classes, more instruments.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
don't, yeah, and they don't get much love. And I
Mm.
mean, in the way that we show love in the West, right? I guess like affectionate
Right.
love from your parents or showing that someone really cares about you. You're kind of just in this, they're just in this really structured, stressful system, and
Yeah.
so their morale in class is really low. Even if they like you and your class is
Yeah.
fun, they're just going to be tired. So
Yeah.
those are two things that were hard for me to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are good points. Hmm. Um, Anything else? Like maybe what were some things, oh, in the time you've been there, what are some things you found that maybe work for you as a teacher? Like, are there any, methods or games or things you like to do in class that you think, work well in China? Any like strategies or tips or just what do you think works?
No, it's really hard for me to give advice that go across the board because everyone has really, uh, you know, really different outlook and philosophy for how they should teach or what they're actually even doing in the classroom, right? Some people think they're
Okay.
there to, yeah, like some teachers think they're there to mold these minds and create these people that are going to be good citizens or whatever, or some of them are just like, I'm just trying to get them ready for college. And some
Uh-huh.
people are like, I want them to actually be the best version of themselves, and I want to help them figure that out. So those are three totally different people, right? So
Sure.
depending on
Sure.
what kind of person you are, I don't even like giving advice because of that. But for me
Well, let's
personally,
let's yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. Just you personally, not necessarily advice, but yeah, what has worked for you?
showing them that it's okay to make mistakes and that it's okay to give me their opinion. A lot of them are really afraid of that
Mm,
because of the reaction they've had from parents. And I've had lots of really bad experiences showing myself when I was young to adults and even into college where I'm just like, oh man, he really embarrassed me because I said that about myself and he thought that was stupid, all right, or something like that. And it's really scary to do that. So for me personally, I want students to know that it's okay to try and be yourself in front of me, but I tell them two things: is just because that's okay with me, don't expect that with everyone else, because some people will not allow you to be that way. In fact, they will shame you. So I preface that saying, with me it's okay, don't expect all other adults to do that, because some adults don't even do that to each other. And secondly, I say embarrassing things about myself, things that mistakes
Ah,
I've made. Yeah, like, and I don't just mean being silly. Like I do be silly in front of class, so it's okay to have fun. But I'll say like really big life mistakes I've made, so they can see like, hey, this is a person that maybe would be okay with me sharing my mistakes, because you don't want to share your
you
mistakes to someone that is perfect, because then you're gonna feel like they're gonna judge you.
right. So you show your own flaws and maybe vulnerability.
Yeah.
Okay.
And some people will say, you do not do that. You do not smile the first 3 months of class. Like some teachers will have this absolutely different perspective on how they want to run things. And I tried. I'm not a big fan of Oprah, but there's one quote that's a whole other story. But there is one quote that said, like, be the person that you needed when you were younger. I don't know if she
Hmm.
made that up herself or she got it from somewhere else, but that resonates with me because I went through a lot of bad stuff. And so when I think back, like, man, it would have been really nice if I had someone who was like this at this moment. So I try to be that.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good. That's really good. Um, okay. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. What would you say about, again, coming to China the first time? Would you say there's any courses they should take, or documentaries a person should watch, or books a person should read, or what are maybe some things a person should bring with them? Like, I would say, for example, two things I would recommend people bring with them or do before they go to China is one, before you go to China, buy and install VPN on your phone, your computer, whatever. And two, I would recommend most people go to like a Barnes and Noble or wherever and get some basic Mandarin English phrase book or dictionary.
The VPN for sure. I use apps for all my translation needs, and that seems to be
Okay.
just fine. But VPN for sure. Um, As for what I mean, if picking up some very basic Chinese would have been nice, I'm only learning it now. Now that I've been here for
Okay.
so long, because like I was like, I'm not only going to be here for 2 years, and it's way too much time for me to dedicate and then just go home and never use it again. But now that I'm planning on staying longer, I'm like, okay, I need to learn how to speak. So yeah, just like learning just very basic stuff so you can have you might be in a place where you constantly have someone helping you, which is nice. But if you don't, like where I'm at now, I have to get out there on my own. So
Yeah.
learning some
Yeah.
basic speech, just home stuff like medicine and deodorant
Oh yeah.
are
Yeah. Yeah.
medicine, deodorant, and depending on how big you are, I cannot buy shoes in China and I can't buy clothes in China. I have to import everything, and it's really expensive. So.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, also with Western medicine, like even just ibuprofen, NyQuil, Benadryl, and deodorant, like they don't have Western style versions of those things so readily available.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's good advice. All right. Maybe we've been talking for a while. Maybe final question, and we've probably sort of covered this a little bit. Well, we've covered so much, but
Yeah.
if someone were to ask you, what would you say, just again in general, off the top of your head, what are like the pros of living in? Maybe we talked about this a little bit, but just in case we didn't, I'm going to edit this, by the way. But what
Yeah,
would you
yeah.
say are some pros and some cons of living in China?
Um, for me personally, living in China is better financially because the my net income at the end of the month is more than I make in America. Because of I don't have to own a car, have insurance, rent. All these like life in America is so expensive, especially if you don't make
Yes.
much money. So
Yes.
my bottom line is much better here, So I love that, and food's also cheaper, entertainment's cheaper as long as you don't always desire Western things.
Uh huh.
Um, the life here is really a lot easier for a teacher, not for everybody, but my life here is so much better financially, transportation wise. I can do everything with ease. I do love that, but the the big problem is the language barrier. I can't speak to people, and it makes everything difficult. Like if you want to buy a certain amount of something that weighs this many, grams or kilograms, like if you're buying fruit, it's hard, like buying a certain amount of carrots is way more difficult than you think if you don't speak the language, right? So
Uh-huh.
everything is an adventure, but it's also tiresome because, like, oh man, I'm hungry, but getting food is really not easy right now. I can't just go to the store and, hey, what do you have here? What's good? Oh yeah, I've never had that before. If you can't talk, it's so much more difficult.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely good to. When I went to China my first time, I didn't know any Chinese, and I kind of had to have, yeah, Chinese students like babysit me and help me do things. I did get from my organization, they did give me a few things. Like I think they gave me some sort of English Chinese menu, so I could go to restaurants and get certain dishes. So I did have that, and that helped me. But I think during the first winter holiday, I went to Beijing and I got, yeah, like a phrase book, and I started learning basic Chinese, just, how to say how much does it cost, and and count to 100, and a lot of those things, just like duo xiao qian, how much does it cost,
Yeah.
and yi bai qian, 100 renminbi, things like that, really, really, really useful. And if someone is interested in going to China for a year, I would say there's so many books, there's so many resources. If you're a university student, take a course or two. But even if you're done with college, I would say, like, if you got time, try to learn some basic language, absolutely, before you go, because it will make your life easier. Certain parts of the world, if you go to like Bangkok or Tokyo, enough people speak English, even Beijing maybe, that you don't really need to know, like to get around in Thailand, you don't need to know Thai. To get around in Japan, you don't necessarily need to know Japanese, but definitely in China, it's helpful.
Yeah, and like in the heart of Shanghai, like if you're in the city like proper, you can get by with English pretty easy. But if you're on the outskirts and the further away you go from a major city center, it's a lot harder.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that depends too. Like, if you're just going to go to Shanghai for a year, or Chaoyang district of Beijing, or Shenzhen on the Hong Kong border, yeah, maybe you don't really need to learn Chinese. But yeah, if you're going to go somewhere second, third tier city, somewhere rural, if you're going to go to like Anhui province, or certain parts of the country, yeah, it's definitely worth learning some of the language. I speak a bit, and super helpful. Super helpful. I
Yeah.
totally recommend it. Yeah.
The one question that you had at the end there about advice for students who are going to go abroad.
Oh, sure. Let's do that one too.
Yeah, so if you want to include this or not, but this is an interesting perspective that I had. Is I had a student talk to me about why she wants to leave China to go abroad, because I write comic books and she illustrates comic books. That's what she wants to do. She already had some work done, so we were chatting about it, and she's gay. I didn't know that at the
Ah,
time, but yeah, she told me
Chinese
that.
girl. Chinese girl.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And so she told me that, like, she can't publish her books here. She can't sell them, and because of censorship towards LGBT. And I really don't know much about LGBT issues here in China. Why that's considered taboo here, I don't know the cultural reasoning behind why that is. Um, so that's something I need to inform myself more about. But she was telling me she wants to go to another country so she can be free in that sense. I'm like, oh man, because I don't have to deal with any censorship for anything I want to do. None of my books fall under the, something that's not allowed to be discussed here. So I don't have any. So in my opinion, my life here is way more free than America because I have more time and resources to do the things I want. So here I
Uh
feel
huh.
and I also have zero obligation. Like
Right.
I'm like, no one's expecting me to be involved with Chinese politics or matters. So I'm really just here doing whatever I want. So
Yeah.
it's feels so free. But to some people who are in this circumstance, they don't feel free at all. And
Right.
she was one of them. So I felt that was really enlightening to me. But then so I was talking to another student about going to college or university abroad, and I kind of wanted to warn them a little bit about what kind of person they're going to become, because it's inevitable they will become less Chinese.
Mm.
And if that's, I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. It's just you're going to be exposed to things that are going to change who you are. If you don't want that to happen, you need to self-censor yourself. My brother-in-law is from a very small town in rural Wisconsin, and I've gone there to visit, and it's a nice place, but there's no diversity at all, and no diversity of thought. So many people
Uh,
don't, you know, like they might have never seen a black person until they joined the military when they were 18. You know, like, you know what I'm saying? They know these people and these ideas and these things are out there in the world, but they've never really experienced it. So they have their bubble of what's right and what's wrong and what's a good person and what's a bad person. And good people don't do this and bad people always do this. And then when you go join the military or you move somewhere else, you're just like, whoa, things are different. So when you're Chinese and you go abroad, you're going to really experience it. It's going to change who you are. And there's a movie that I watched a portion of a long time ago. It's like a 20-year-old movie. It's called Going to School with My Father on My Back. It's a Chinese movie.
huh.
And it's about a rural farmer who has two kids but can only afford to send one of them to school. So he's like pinning his hopes and dreams on, like, you got to make it. You got to make it in school to take care of the family. So there's this family pressure. But as he becomes more educated and learns more things, he's like, I don't know if I want to be a farmer. I don't want this life.
Huh.
So this is just within Chinese culture. This is just a microcosm for what I'm trying to say, is that this kid gets exposed to this new life outside of his village, and he's like, whoa, I can go do something else. I can be a scientist, or like, I don't have to just do this. And so it completely changed his world. And it's good that he's excelling, but it's also alienating him from the expectations of his family. So if you leave China and you go to Australia or different parts of America or wherever, you're going to see something totally new that might change who you are to a great deal, and that might cause friction between your family's expectations for you and what you want.
Hmm.
Just kind of a
Yeah,
summary of the whole
interesting.
conversation we were talking about between collectivism and the individual.
Right, right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I was just happy to listen to that. I don't have anything to add to it.
Yeah. Yeah, so and that's something I think about a lot, mainly because I have my Filipino expectations for me and my white American expectations for me, and how those didn't really line up. And then there's just my own desires and how they don't align with either of those sometimes. And it caused a lot of friction between family members. And um, I just can imagine what it's like if someone leaves China and goes somewhere else and just sees this totally different life.
Right, right. Yeah, and I imagine some probably love it and sort of assimilate and adapt to it and say, "Woohoo, I got all this freedom." And I think others retreat from it, and you know what I mean? Because you go to like San Francisco, for example. I'm sure you're familiar with that area. That's pretty
Yeah.
close to where you're from. And what did Chinese people do? Like, some assimilate, but they literally build a Chinatown. They're not big into like assimilation, I think.
Yeah, it depends on where you're at. Like if you're at a place where that's an option, you might be less likely to explore outside of your community. I would say that's even true here, right? Like at the last school I was at, there was hundreds of Western teachers. So they all
Oh,
just stay together. It was a huge school. There's like over 5,000 students. So there's
right,
like a ton of teachers. But here at my university, there's three of us, right?
right.
So and they're one of them's married, and the other guy's doing his own thing. So we kind of have to go integrate and be more involved with local people and try and interact more. We can't just segregate ourselves into this community that's pre-existing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So it just depends on where you end up going. You might end up in a place where, oh my God, it's just like home, or you're just like, wow, I'm in the middle of Iowa, and
Mm.
here I am. So let's do it.
Yeah, and I think that's a little more interesting.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, we've been talking, I think, for over 2 hours, so I think we covered a lot of ground and got through the questions. I think we can wrap it up, and yeah, I'll just say I appreciate you taking the time and participating in this. I think this is a good conversation, and yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem, man. This was really fun to talk about. I'm sure you're gonna spend so much time editing all of these things because you got to listen to these over and over again. You're gonna get sick of my voice. So good luck.
Cheers.
All right.